excited to have Dave Fano from WeWork here. So as Scott talked about, they're doing some pretty incredible things. We are a WeWork customer, so we have 8 offices. 7 of them are WeWorks, where we have anywhere from 5 to 10 people. And it's hard to get our actual teams to leave. They don't want to get office space on their own. They want to stay there. Unfortunately, it gets very expensive once you go past 6 people. But that's the experience that they've figured out, and that's now expanding to the larger user. So welcome, Dave Fano.
Thanks everyone for having me. That was really not scripted, I promise. I just like robots. I didn't want Scott to talk about WeWork. Dave Fano, Chief Product Officer. My title is very intentional in that we're trying to productize the real estate process. But a quick background on me: I'm trained as an architect, a building architect, but I've spent most of my life basically fighting that I went to school for architecture because of my passion for technology. And so out of grad school, I went to work at Shop Architects, which is a real sort of tech-savvy architecture firm. Really enjoyed it there. Started a technology consulting practice focusing on the building industry and how we could bring technology to it. WeWork became one of our largest clients, and they acquired our company about 2 years ago. So that's what brought me here. And my scope today is design, construction, sales, marketing, and for the last 6 months, launching our enterprise business. So that's a little context on me. For WeWork, for anyone that doesn't know, WeWork is, we like to say it's a platform for creators, for people to do their life's work. And that sounds like it's very community oriented, because that's what it is. We actually don't really see ourselves as a real estate business. I like to say that real estate for us is what books were for Amazon. We are about community and having people be together, elbow to elbow, doing work and living out their missions and making a meaningful impact on this planet. The company right now has 125,000 members. That's about 25,000 companies, so peoples and organizations. We're at about 159 locations. This is as of July 1st. We open buildings at the beginning of every month. You guys can read this. We're growing very quickly. This year we'll probably average around 500,000 square feet a month of growth, with no signs of slowing that down. That gives you some sense of the volume. I want to zip through this quickly so Brandon and I can get to questions. But thinking about the workplace, when you look up what the workplace is, it's basically a place where people go do stuff. And that's how we've always thought about the workplace. Just people come together, put work in place, do things, and I just don't think that's how the world is thinking about the workplace. And if you look at the changing tides in the workplace, the gig economy, freelance workers, millennials, it is changing across the world. And if you look at our demographics and kind of how the company shapes up, we're starting to see some of those things. So a lot of people think that WeWork is all startups, which it's not. You see about 15% of our businesses are less than a year in existence, and it's pretty blended out, actually, the kind of companies that we have in there. Again, I won't jump into too much of that, but what we kind of feel is that the worker wants a place where they make a life, not just a living. Like, they want to be around like-minded people, mission-oriented companies. It's what people expect. And startups have that. The young startup company, which was the origins of WeWork, Adam and Miguel, who founded the company, that was part of their friction as they were starting their businesses, both being kind of serial entrepreneurs. And there's a lot we can learn from startups. They just don't care about a lot of things. They have no problems with ramen on their keyboard, being right up close next to each other, because it's really about the work and the mission and the passion. And somehow or another, we kind of transition to this. And it becomes about kind of how much surface area I have and how much area do I have to put stuff on, or what is that as a sort of indicator of my status in the organization. And this is going away. Startups don't, they see that, and that's not really what they're looking to do. And what we're seeing is that these large enterprises actually want to be smaller. They want to act smaller. They want to be agile. They want to be nimble. They want to be able to make fast decisions, not long 15-year decisions or 10-year decisions. I kind of have some beliefs on why I think this is the way it is. So this is my little story about the pot roast. And it's, I think it's a narrative that is, I think the real estate industry kind of suffers from this. So there's a story of a mom and a daughter cooking a pot roast, and the mom takes the pot roast out of the fridge, and the first thing she does is she cuts the ends off. And the daughter says to her, why do you do that? Why do you cut off the ends of the pottery? She says, well, it was in the recipe. It's grandma said that's just what we do. So they call grandma, they get her on the phone, and they ask her, why do you do that? She says, well, it's just in the recipe. It's just always been there. It's what I've always done. So they're able to get on the phone with the great-grandmother, and they ask her, she wrote the recipe. Why do you do that? And she says, well, it's just my pot was too small and the roast didn't fit, And that's just, I think, emblematic of a lot of things, that we just do it because that's what it always was. And I think that speaks to the lack of data in this industry. We can't go back and validate things, so we just kind of go with the way it's always been. And I think that's changing. I think this is one of them. I like to think a lot about density and space utilization and energy and what it makes a space feel like. And when you think about like the workbench, maybe it's 40 square feet, 30 square feet, what a person actually needs to work, a typical office worker. But then you look at what some of the companies are doing, and I think this affects landlords a lot in the way that you're thinking about how tenants are going to use space and consume it. Some companies go up to as high as 350 square feet a person. A lot of private offices, there's corner offices, and this is a shift that we're just seeing across the board. You layer on attendance, and then let's say 200 square feet. And I think it's not unfair to say offices are maybe 50% occupancy. So that's 400 square feet a person. It's essentially 2 shipping containers per person. And you go into that office and it just feels dead. Like, people don't want that. They want to be around that energy and that buzz. And we're seeing more and more companies trying to pursue this, whether it through some sort of provider like us or on their own, or a lot of the great CRE firms are now starting to provide services that enable them to do this. But the pursuit of like hospitality in the workplace is very much on demand. And this is a report I found from the GSA from 2011, obviously one of the largest sort of holders of real estate in the US. And they kind of predicted that the workplace would go down to around 60 square feet a person. I don't think we're quite there as an industry. I was just in the UK a couple weeks ago, and they average around 70. So they actually are really making that push. But here I'd say we're probably closer to between 150 and 200, and that might even be being a little generous. So our push recently has been more around large organizations, and it's not even like we went out there. They were kind of coming to us, and so we finally woke up to it and had to figure out how to do it. And what we're calling the new enterprise, they really want the scalability, the flexibility, the things that the last panel was talking about. Companies don't want to be held back by these things. The world is switching to kind of everything as a service. If you look at what's happened with network infrastructure and sort of the cloud, but really it's just about a ton of data centers and companies that centrally manage those, so that companies those that need that kind of horsepower can buy it in the increment that they need it and dynamically. They don't want to have to commit to building out that themselves. Then even things that are maybe less obvious, like engines, right? I'm Boeing. I don't want to buy this engine and build out a whole crew. I want to rent it from Rolls-Royce, and I want them to manage every single aspect of it. I want them to be monitoring the data on it. I want them to know if one of the fins is slightly tweaked and wrong, so I can change it immediately. And it's really, that's what we're seeing, is companies are going to kind of everything as a service, full turnkey, because it's not their core competency and they don't want to deal with it. So space as a service is kind of the way we've thought about it, kind of fixed, isolated, unscalable is sort of, I think, how we think about real estate today. They're long-term decisions. It's not a very customer-friendly process. And companies in general are wanting to go to more flexible, integrated, and globally available. We're moving more towards a platform approach to real estate. And not us as WeWork. I just think tenants and occupiers are looking for that of the folks that provide space to them. And so, a couple quick metrics on our enterprise business, just to give everyone a sense. I mean, it's of the 125,000 members, about 25,000 of those people are for companies that are 1,000 plus employees. So it is our fastest growing segment. About 30% of our monthly sales are for that segment. And it's just like an indicator of the market demand. They are looking for more flexible solutions. So with that, it gives you kind of a sense of where we are, a snapshot of kind of our philosophy on things, and jump over to some questions with Brandon.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So why don't we take a seat? So I'm very, very excited to have Dave here, because I think what WeWork is doing today sits at the crux of, I think, one of our industry's biggest challenges, which is really around reframing the tenant as a customer and rethinking the user experience for that tenant. So maybe I'll kick off. I'm super curious that, like, given the worldview that you just presented, which I think is compelling, and in the audience here, a lot of WeWork partners, right? So, you know, many of these landlords have done long-term leases with you. WeWork is an amenity in their buildings. What do you see as like the kind of greatest sacred cow that will be, you know, effectively slaughtered, given that worldview, kind of in commercial real estate that is, you know, currently held?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting. I mean, the last panel I thought really hit on a lot of interesting topics, and one that I would answer with this is it's sort of leases as a thing, like whether it be volume and square footage or term. I'd say those are the kind of two dimensions, major dimensions of the lease. And I think that occupiers, and given the world we're living in today, that it's just as dynamic as it is, and things are changing as quickly as they are, and globalization, that companies just can't make those kinds of commitments. And I think they're going to be looking for more and more flexibility. I mean, I'm curious to see what some of these tax laws do. My knowledge is not as deep on it, but I think it's going to have, I mean, it's kind of two views, right? It's either high impact or none, because everything's just going to do it together. But I think that that's something that is going to change, and I'm curious to see how sort of capital markets respond to it, and how the whole industry changes.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's almost like the, you know, the irresistible force and immovable object of, you know, what you were talking about, which is corporate agility, and I think, you know, we're a case in point of this. I mean, we're growing like crazy, and I think we're in a 7-year lease, and it's just incredible. I mean, those are orthogonal concepts, right? So, and then everyone in the audience here who, you know, are building and buying investment-grade assets where, you know, effectively what is being underwritten is long-term credit revenue. How does that play out in your mind?
Yeah, I think either sort of the industry changes, and those that sort of are the, you know, because we don't own the space, right? We're kind of an intermediary between the occupier and the landlords who actually own all the assets. And I think that there's going to be, kind of the way I see the world shaping up, there's going to be people like us who are going to be turnkey, sort of end-to-end solutions. There's going to be a lot of great companies come out there that do that. I think that you're seeing it already in the commercial real estate firms, and they're going to continue to enhance their sort of suite of services because they're already touching it end-to-end. And I think that's a healthy thing. It's going to put a pressure on them to add new value. And I think you're going to see landlords do it themselves.
Yeah.
You know, and I think I'd say the ones that are going to do it most successfully are the ones that are going to obsess on the occupier, like the person who is actually using the space, the customer. Yeah. Because if it's just about like throwing a barista in the lobby, I don't think it's going to be about that. Yeah. It's going to be about the community and the curation, making sure that these people build meaningful connections and investing in those relationships.
Super interesting. I think, so yesterday we had this challenge for the audience, which was stop saying tenant. Just don't say it. Don't say it for this conference. Replace that word with customer and start reframing the way that you think about that. So and then you just hit on this point, which is its focus on the user experience there. Break that apart for these folks who are trying to get closer to the customer, closer to the user. Like, what do you see as like the most important kind of elements of that user experience in terms of driving satisfaction and happiness?
I mean, it's really caring about them, right? It's like if you guys right now, you can't get to your space, you just became a landlord. You need to sublet it. Yeah. You need to deal with it, right? That happened to us as Case. Okay. We took 10,000 square feet, even though we only needed 5, and then we had to deal with it. Yep. And like, they just didn't care. Yeah. You know, I think it's kind of simple as like, we're a small fry tenant, but I think it's just like needing to care. Yeah. And then, but how does that execute into strategy? So like, what are examples of that caring? What are things that these folks should be thinking about in terms of executing to evidence that care? I mean, like, here's a very like tactical example. It's not to say go out and do this, but you know, there's and this happens all the time within the context of WeWork, but there's one particular one where this guy was in one of our buildings in Midtown and lost his job. And he was an employee in a company. It wasn't even like a startup that shut down, lost his job, goes to the community manager, which every building has a community manager, and super distraught and says, I don't even know what I'm going to do. Like, I just lost my job. I got a kid. I just moved into the city. And very quickly, that community manager started to reach out to all of the sort of founders and owners of the companies in that building, reached out to the community managers in the other buildings that were around them. And within a day, they found this guy a job. In the WeWork network, so in the tenant network. Like, right, awesome. And Like that's the kind of stuff that it's an investment in these people's success. Like that, we care that they succeed. And if they succeed, we succeed. And I think that's kind of it's not just us as WeWork. I just think business in general has to start to move that way.
Yeah, that's cool. That's powerful. So I want to get into a specific example or a big deal that hit the market about a month ago. I think it was IBM recently did a big deal with WeWork to, effectively, I think they took an entire building, and WeWork is, effectively kind of managing the user experience there. Maybe you don't need to get into the details of that, but just broadly, IBM's a tenant of probably 20 people in this audience, right? And they're a massive corporate. And you talked about large corporations are trying to get smaller. Like, what is IBM trying to accomplish there? Like, where are they trying to go with that?
I'm looking at like our PR guy back in the room. I'm not commenting on the IBM part.
You don't need to. Corporate.
We are having large companies look to take entire locations, and there's a couple things. They want speed to market. They don't want to deal with everything that Scott talked about. They have internal teams, and they've got great relationships with the CRE firms to manage a lot of that stuff for them, but sometimes they just need to act quicker than that. And sourcing real estate takes a while, especially in markets that have low vacancy or timing that possession date and all that stuff is challenging. So I think there's the very tactical and functional benefit, but then there's the experience. They want access to that experience and then access to the platform. It's not just about that single location, it's about being able to sort of disperse and leverage the platform and get higher efficiency for their staff and so they're not kind of traveling around, there's that. I think a lot of it is around, it depends on the company. Different companies have different motives, and I don't want to sort of paint them all with the same brush. Some larger organizations are looking for a way to kind of, again, jolt the meatloaf story. It's like, oh, well, that's our corporate standard. This is the size of the desk. This is what we do. This is what we do. It's like, well, you know what? If we leave the context of our four walls, we can kind of experiment a little bit and prove it out. So we'll see some companies do that. They'll kind of, the same way you guys were talking about iterating and failing fast in an agile way. Third-party providers give them an ability to do that outside of their walls, which are outside of the purview of their facilities groups. So that's a use case. And then certain, sometimes different departments want just a different setting, and they kind of want to get out of the building.
Got it. It's fascinating. So you talk about corporate being your fastest growing segment. Does it look like that type of relationship where it's, full building, large scale transaction with a corporate, or is it more distributed and they're taking, handfuls of desks across hundreds of WeWorks? How do you think about that?
We've seen all sorts of use cases. A remote worker that works for a large company and just needs a private office for themselves, to the whole other end of a spectrum of, a regional HQ, 1,000 people. Sometimes it's a whole, I think the earliest ones we saw, and I think this is a really important part of what we do, was the innovation groups wanting to be around startups and be around sort of agile, quick, iterative companies and be involved in that dialogue.
So the network around them. So the other tenants in that space, just the energy from those tenants.
They'd take a 20-person office, and it's their R&D team or an innovation team for a big corporate company. And that was happening without us even trying. That was happening organically, and that was kind of one of the cues into that. And then now we're starting to see all sorts of different use cases. Quick as a swing space, as a permanent home, as a bridge between two spaces, overflow. All the same use cases you would see in real estate. We're just kind of modeled to accept them.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think there was an interesting discussion yesterday, and I think it was Kevin Danahy from Brookfield. So two things. One, so first a stat. So read that 0.7% of the total office stock in the United States is some form of co-working. 0.7, less than 1% of total office stock is this notion of flexible, agile space. And actually, I think 3/4 of that was Regus, right? Which is effectively kind of an older school incumbent model. And then contrast that to a discussion that we had yesterday on one of our panels where Kevin Danahy said he could conceive of Brookfield having north of 20% of their office space be of a flexible variety, whether it's partnership with WeWork or, to your point, they've internalized it as an amenity for the large organizations in there, et cetera. look out 5 years from now, you guys are growing like crazy, 500,000 square feet a month. Like, what does WeWork look like 5 years from now?
Like I said during the talk, real estate for us is like books for Amazon, right? Now it's the everything store. So I think we are very much committed to enabling people to do their life's work or live. I'm getting caught up with my words, but it's about the people and their success and not consuming real estate. Yeah. So I think we're going to continue to do things that are going to bring people together. We have a genuine belief that together they can accomplish more than by themselves, and continue to do the kinds of things we need to do to flush out that community. So, we genuinely believe that you need to physically be in the same space, that there is a value from that, which is much greater than sort of pure digital connection. I think we need both. So I think we're going to start to see different experiences. We've got the 2 WeLives open, which have been really exciting and a lot of really interesting learnings there. We kind of went into that with the idea that it would be sort of millennials out of school, but now we've got folks in there that are with families and all sorts of different use cases, which has been very exciting to see. And so I think you're going to start to see a lot of that. And we've talked about, all of the things that we're doing aren't going to need to be in the 4 walls that we manage. I think you're going to start to see us sort of go out to the world a little bit. And not everyone needs to come to us. We're going to start going to people. And
what does that mean?
It's so right now the WeWork model is mostly, or no, exclusively, like either leases we sign or management agreements we sign, but it's a space that we essentially manage. Yep. And I think we're, as a way to sort of expand the community and open it up to more people, and this has come, I think, from the work with the large corporates, is us going to them and helping them build community within their 4 walls and not giving them, but sort of encouraging them to participate in the broader global community.
Interesting. Gotcha. There was a term yesterday that we were talking about, it was like kind of workplace as a service, like actually taking the concept of amenities, people connections, and applying that or selling that as a service. Is that kind of what you're talking about then?
Yeah. We've sort of come out and said that's essentially what we're going to do. Yeah. The WeWork in the broadest sense, like the We company, but it's going to break up in these kind of 2 buckets. We come to you, or you come to us. And it's not an or, it's an and. Yeah. It's going to be a sort of platform approach. Some companies may have situations where they want us to come to them, or they want to come to us, but the experience for their employees would be unified.
That's a really interesting concept. So I want to open it up for questions, because this is a unique opportunity to get the guy thinking about product for WeWork right now. So raise hands if you've got them, and then we'll come around with mics. Eric, I think I saw you had a question. Yeah.
You mentioned the pivot to residential, just in terms of kind of expanding out of really a pure office play. Do you see the future in industrial or retail for WeWork? When you just think about all the change happening in industrial with kind of web services and really the disruption to that sector, I'm curious to know if it's something that's on the team's mind, or if it's really more office and residential for the near future.
I'd say we think about everything. There's no shortage of ideas at WeWork, but I think we're very focused on the sort of commercial and residential environments right now. We've experimented with retail because not oftentimes, but there's a few instances where we get access to the retail space. And so far we've done that either through partnership, or we've made them actually the first building had the retail space in it. And it's kind of been an extension of the work model, but we haven't done anything that I'd say is particularly retail focused to date.
I have a couple of questions here. Go ahead.
Hi. Have you been looking at all, kind of a lot of talk about, different large box retailers potentially going out over time as to converting, old Lowe's stores or Home Depot type buildings into, these co-working kind of boxes?
We source 5 to 10 deals a week, so we look at a lot of stuff, and so it has to do with economics and risk, and we run those and look at different things. I can't think of anything right now that's particularly slated, but
It's a follow-up question on that is, so One of the questions I think the community has a lot is like, when does WeWork become a landlord? When does WeWork become a direct competitor, or extend kind of beyond the the lease partner? What are you guys doing today in terms of just actually acquiring the assets versus leasing them?
We're not doing that. And yeah.
Good answer. Awesome. Other questions? I saw a couple. Alec?
Quick question. It kind of bridges both panels. So you've got investors in companies with the VC panel. You have occupiers. You guys host these small companies that are growing rapidly. Could you not combine the both and basically become incubators and find these companies and have a really early insight into investing in these firms? So do you have any plans of starting to almost house these companies with the goal of financing them and helping them grow?
No plans. I mean, I think it's something that's been talked about since the early days of WeWork, and there was a sort of sub-brand called WeWork Labs for a while, and it was really about giving them the infrastructure and not investing. It was about, with a very curated content, giving them access to lawyers and introductions to VCs, but we thought it would kind of put us in a weird relationship with the members if we were invested. So, it's been talked about a lot, but we've never done it.
Dave, does WeWork focus consciously on particular industries? Like, my understanding of WeWork is very limited, but I understand when you moved to Vancouver in Canada, you took space downtown, and most of the community, let's call them, are in the movie industry. I come from Calgary, where 65% of the occupants are oil and gas. Our industry is decimated, but from this chaos, I see some huge potential for a WeWork type company to get all these people that have been laid off, whatever, and move into a community and collaborate and emerge. So I don't know if you guys focus on a particular segment, a particular industry, or is it just, here we are and it evolves?
Yeah, to be honest with you, we haven't done that in a overt way. We oftentimes come in and the company's experimented with it. Like, one of the early buildings had a floor that was actually tailored to architects, and it was meant to be a very curated architectural community. But that puts a lot of pressure on us to maintain that specificity. So we've kind of just let it happen organically. We come into a building, I'd say the bets we're making is on the sort of office distribution. We're not really using movable partitions or anything, so we take an approach to what we think that office sizing should be. But even still, that doesn't really affect the company sizing, because oftentimes a company of 10 people might take 2 5-person offices, so they kind of use it like graph paper as they need to. From an industry perspective, oftentimes I think the buildings just kind of mold to what's around them. So the buildings we have in Midtown are gonna tend to be more financially oriented, or the ones downtown. The ones in Chelsea, might be a little bit more startup-y. So we don't really target industries in a particular way. There's some industries that are just also more applicable to be in a shared environment than those that are, like high privacy. But we're now starting to introduce kind of new layers to the product to expand its potential user base.
Cool. We get a question back here?
I'm just curious what top trends that WeWork pays attention to most.
What top trends
Top trends.
that WeWork pays attention to most?
Sorry, I'm covering a lot of different stuff in the business right now, so I look at a lot of different things. I guess from our real estate site selection, we're looking at kind of activity in markets and submarkets, from sort of social activity and how that's changing over time, business activity. Employment's a big one. Kind of what we're seeing is that, especially as we focus more on these larger organizations, is they're really after talent. And so we're starting to track, where's the talent going and what cities are attracting the most talent, so that we can be there and then provide the environments that talent wants to be in. I'd say following the people is really the most.
Demographics and beyond. Okay, got it. Cool. We got Howard, we probably got time for one or two more. Howard, go ahead.
What do you think is WeWork's greatest threats? The potential threats to WeWork's. So the disruptor of the disruptors.
PR guy again. No, like I think that I like to say.
Can your PR guy leave the room?
Yeah. I've oftentimes when I'm asked like what especially when we sold the company 2 years ago, what's going to be the biggest challenge? I really feel like the biggest challenge for us is staying focused. And I think that there's a lot of different things that we could do, and we have a tremendous amount of opportunity given kind of the platform we've built, and that we really have this community that is looking for us to provide more and more value. And I think that us being sort of strategic about the kinds of things we try to layer on is, I'd say ourselves is kind of like, making sure that we stay on track with our mission and what we're trying to do, and don't branch out into other things. I guess that's the thing that kind of keeps me up as one of the people that instigates a lot of the wacky ideas, trying to like rein myself in, and really, living to our mission.
Well, that's great. I've got a quick question that I think is on the minds of a lot of folks here. So there's a lot of talk of, WeWork's great in a hot market, rising market where everything's expanding and, we've got all sorts of needs, and, it's gonna totally fall flat in a market that's, that's going the reverse direction. What's your comment on that? Give us a point of view on kind of, on maybe why that's just not correct.
Yes, I mean, if Adam or Miguel were up here, they'd tell you that they started the company in 2010. And then the one that they had started before that, they started in 2008 called Green Desk in Dumbo, right when things were at their worst, and it sold out instantly. So, I think that we'll see how things shake out. Those are interesting times. A lot of people start businesses in those times, and I'd say the best businesses are started in those times. My previous company was started I gave notice at Shop in like August 1st of 2008, and our company did really well because we sold services to architecture firms and helped them innovate and apply technology to their processes. So, I think that, even though in those downtimes a lot of interesting opportunities create, and I think we've done the right, it's hard to say, but I think we've done some interesting things to kind of diversify our offerings. So it's honestly not something that keeps me up at night. But obviously we got to see how the market shapes up.
Awesome. I think we're out of time. We gotta run. Before we let you go, though, I think one thing that I want to hear from you is just one piece of advice for 3 billion square feet of landlords that are in the audience.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's the theme you guys were covering yesterday. Is that you got to care about these tenants, their success is all of our success, and in the broadest sense. These are companies that are trying to do new and incredible things, and those that succeed, I think we succeed as a collective, and to really think of it as a platform. Especially as landlords that have large platforms. We see it. Once we build partnerships with the great landlords, it allows us to just do so much more with them. And I think we're a big tenant, a big growing tenant. But so are a lot of other interesting companies. So I think investing, not financially, but sort of investing in the success of these companies and enabling them to get where they need to go, then everyone will win. Rising tides lifts all ships. So
that is a perfect way to end this. So why don't you join me? Give him a big round of applause. Thanks a lot, Dave. It's fantastic.